the one thing that I could not get past, no, seriously, man, is that, the quote in this story, based on the office that Russell Wilson had, and then obviously some other aspects that were unique for a quarterback to have his own people within the building and the office being on the second floor, that ultimately somebody said that there were too many cooks in the kitchen, and the word cook just jumped off the phone at me, man. All Russ wanted to do was just let him cook, and being allowed to cook in the manner in which he wanted. There were too many cooks. I couldn't get through that. I couldn't get over that.
This is a great example of when you're so close to a story, like that's such an obvious thing to notice, but when you're so close in a story, you're always reading it the night before and going, okay, like what is going to stand out to someone who's not in the middle of it? I actually, as obvious as that is, hadn't thought of that with the cooks in the kitchen. I don't think the person who said it meant that at all. Okay?
Right.
But the interesting thing about this, too, is like the people in Denver don't have the history with Russ. Remember all the, there was almost vitriol from some of the people on the defensive side and the relationship. None of that. We didn't get any of that. I think there's a lot of people still with an open mind of Russ in Denver, but that is hilarious.
Honestly, that just jumped. Too many cooks, said an unnamed coach about it. I'm like, well, that's the word that's been surrounding him, and what was apparently wrong in Seattle, and then apparently what went wrong in Denver in his first year. Because, and also in your story where there was an open door policy in his second floor office, and somebody mentioned, well, the office should have been his locker instead of an actual office. That also hit me too, man. That one.
I got a text today from someone in a different team's front office who said something like, hot take, I think every quarterback should have their office. And I don't necessarily disagree, but I think, what goes along with that, with your own staff in there and open door policy of a player is probably a bit much. Now, I'll say this. It's all solved if you play great ball, right? I mean, if Russell Wilson had a typical Russell Wilson year this last year, these are all details.
Right. Obviously. So how did it all wind up? I mean, that's the interesting aspect, too, is you said at one point management in Denver went to Russ about the office, and then Russ closed up shop and then went back into the locker room, essentially. Was that after Hackett got fired?
I believe that would be the last couple weeks of the season.
So that's it. So then that would be it.
Yeah, so we'll see. I think Hackett is a young coach coming in there, and Russell was such a big name and star with so much juice coming in there that, what was Hackett going to do other than probably acquiesce, maybe overly so? And I think that was a component, too. He had been in Green Bay when Aaron Rodgers had first got there, and there was a little bit of growing pain. Not first got there, but when Matt LaFleur first got there,
right.
And there was some growing pains. So I think, the red carpet was rolled out for Russell, maybe to a fault in the end.
So how do you think it's going to work? So many folks think that Russ, to use a pop culture phrase, jumped the shark last year. But ultimately, in your reporting, the guy who he wanted Seattle to hire, if he got his way, due to your reporting with his coach and general manager, is the guy who's now coaching him. So
I think he's going to be better. I think this was the worst case possible scenario of play. I think the one thing about Russell Wilson is I think he's always worked hard. And so if he's going to work hard, you would think with this offseason, my own personal opinion is I feel like he needs to lose about 10 pounds and just get that quickness back that he had, right? And just really be dialed in that component. And then Sean Payton do the rest, because Sean Payton always had a run game for Drew Brees, right? Set that up. I think he can still be a good quarterback. I don't think he's going to be – I think we've seen the best of him, though. I don't think he's going to be elite like he was, and I think it's going to be an uphill battle in that division. But I do think he's definitely going to be better than he was this last season, when just almost everything that could go wrong seemed like it did.
And by the way, I mean, you're reporting on what happened at the end in Seattle. For the league then to pop them on the same field week one, I mean, talk about zero chill. I mean, this thing is raw. That had to have been raw. At least when Brady saw Belichick, it was a full season. He had one in the case for himself. It was week 4 in the second year against. Wow.
Yeah.
And so
I know.
Right.
Everyone was noticing at the time. Look, there's no. We knew there was tension, but there was Russell Wilson, as we said, was meeting all of these people on the field. You'd think the head coach would be the most natural one. And I think you just sort of like almost hope for everybody's legacies that time heals all, right? That in the end, Russell Wilson takes his rightful spot in the Ring of Honor, and, you know, that rawness of that and even whatever's still percolating maybe goes away with time. And I've seen that. I used to cover the Seahawks. Kenny Easley hated this franchise. He came back into the fold. It took him 15 years, but they come back. And so that's probably the best case scenario for everyone, given all that Russell Wilson did contribute in Seattle, which was a lot.
And they'll never do it because, again, I saw Pete in Munich, and he, in the meeting where, you know, things get said in meetings with broadcast teams, I didn't get a hint about Russ and him. It was all how great Geno is and how he felt like, you know, it was time for a new voice, and with Bobby Wagner too. But for the season to play out the way that it did, where your deep dive on what happened with Russ, again, too many cooks wound up being had, and again that word leapt off the screen at me. And Geno Smith is the comeback player of the year, even though what is he coming back from, the bench? But I mean, like, you know, had to have been, and they made the playoffs and threatened the 49ers and that wild card round. That has to be something that they would love to crow about, but don't. Mike.
Yeah, and I think it speaks for itself, right? I mean, they don't even have to, because everyone knows. I mean, you couldn't have had a more extreme juxtaposition. I just think longer term, Jody Allen's going to sell the team long term per Paul Allen, the late Paul Allen, the former owner's estate planning. And Pete Carroll's, 70, 71, he's not going to be coaching in the team in 10 years from now. I mean, I don't want to speak for Pete, but I would guess he's probably not. So the time will come is what I mean. The time will come for the people there will be different, and what Russell Wilson contributed to Seattle will be fully appreciated on the merits, which is just playing great ball for a long time, no matter how it ended.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.